Okay, boys and girls, let's check out this perfect competition question. It's going to be a long one. So, mixed martial artists treat Muay Thai lessons and Brazilian Jujitsu lessons as complementary goods. Because to beat the shit out of your opponent, you must fight while standing and on the ground as well. Street fighters treat them as gross substitutes because they believe to beat the shit out of your opponent, you must take him down fast with just one technique. So, Muay Thai lessons are sold in a perfectly competitive market, and the demand of the mixed martial artists is elastic, and that of the street fighters is inelastic. Assume that the street fighters constitute a much smaller group of students than the mixed martial artists. Part A, show the initial equilibrium in the market. Part B, what are the short-run effects of an increase in the price of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu lessons on the equilibrium price and quantity of the Muay Thai lessons, on the spending on Muay Thai lessons from each of the group of students, and what is the output and profit per Muay Thai school. And part C, what will happen to all these elements in the long run. So this is obviously a very long question, and we have to break it down into several quickie pointers. So my first pointer would be that the mixed martial artists treat Muay Thai lessons and BJJ lessons as complementary goods. And the second pointer would be that the street fighters treat these two lessons as gross substitutes, right? So we know that the Muay Thai lessons, they're actually sold in a market that is perfectly competitive. And we also know that the demand of the mixed martial artists is elastic, and the demand from the street fighters is inelastic, and the street fighters are a much smaller group of consumers as compared to the mixed martial artists. So they want to see the initial equilibrium, and they want to see the short-run effects from an increase in the price of the BJJ lessons on the equilibrium price and quantity of Muay Thai lessons. They also want to check out the spending on the Muay Thai lessons from each of the groups of students, and they want to know what is the output and profit of each Muay Thai school. And they also want to see what happens in the long run. So this is how we're going to summarize this question, alright? So let's take a look at all these quickie pointers into detail. Okay, let's talk about the mixed martial artists first. We know that they are the first group of consumers, so I'm just going to write down their consumer group number one. And how do they treat Muay Thai and BJJ lessons? Okay, so we know that Muay Thai and BJJ lessons are actually the goods, and they are complementary, okay, in the view of the MMA fighters. When the demand for Muay Thai goes up, the demand for BJJ will go up. And when the demand for Muay Thai goes down, the demand for BJJ goes down. So, I mean, that's what it means by complements. So, for example, if the price of BJJ were to increase, the quantity demanded for it will definitely decrease. Why? Well, this is simply due to the law of demand, right? When something is more expensive, you want to buy less of it. So, what happens to the quantity demanded for Muay Thai lessons? Since they are complements, the MMA fighters will decrease their quantity demanded for Muay Thai lessons. Right? See, it's easy to apply. Now let's check out the street fighters, which are the second group of consumers. How are they going to treat Muay Thai lessons and BJJ lessons? Okay, they're going to treat them as substitutes, which means that when they increase the demand for Muay Thai lessons, at the same time they're going to decrease the demand for BJJ lessons. And of course, this works the other way around and vice versa as well. Okay, so let's see what happens when there's maybe a decrease in the price of Muay Thai lessons. So this will cause an increase in the quantity demanded for Muay Thai lessons because, again, due to the law of demand. So what do you think happens to the quantity demanded for BJJ lessons? Well, obviously it's going to decrease because the street fighters treat them as substitutes, right? So let's take a look at the third one. We know that the Muay Thai lesson market, which is essentially good X, right, is actually perfectly competitive. And let's do a little recap on what it means by a perfect comp. So in perfect comp, P equals to MC at equilibrium. And the firms or the training schools, they are going to make zero profits in the initial as well as the long run equilibrium. And the firms are going to set the quantity produced based on the market price. So that is where P equals to MC come in. Now let's take a look at the fourth quickie pointer. Now the price elasticity of demand for the mixed martial artists is going to be elastic, so it's more than one. And for the street fighters, it's going to be inelastic. So since the street fighters are a smaller group than the MMAs, this means that the overall market elasticity of demand is going to be more than one. And this also means that how the overall market demand changes depends on how the MMA consumers change their demand. So if the MMA were to increase the demand, then the total market demand will increase, and of course the other way around as well. So let's look at the last quickie pointer. The last quickie pointer is basically a summary of what they want from us. So they want the initial equilibrium, and they want to see the effects of an increase in the price of BJJ on the equilibrium price of Muay Thai. Oops, there's a little bit typo. The equilibrium quantity produced for Muay Thai lessons, the spending on Muay Thai lessons of both of these consumer groups, and they also want to know the profits of the Muay Thai schools. So these we are required to actually come up with the short run and the long run effects. So these two things means that we need to have one market graph, and this over here means we need to have two consumer graphs, and the last one over here means that we need to have one firm graph. So this is how you determine how many graphs you need. You know, it's not by memorizing, oh, in this situation, then I've got this number of graphs. No, okay? It's all about reasoning and trying to deduce how many graphs you need, just like how I did just now. Okay, so let's start with part A, and I'm just going to begin by drawing the 4 graphs that I mentioned I need just now. Okay, so I'm just going to speed this up a little bit because it's taking far too long. Alright, make sure you label the graphs properly and give them the names, alright? So this for MMA, Street Fighters, Market, as well as the representative training school. So what you're going to put into the first graph is the demand curve for the MMA fighters, and I'm going to label that as DM0. And then you have the demand curve for the Street Fighters, which is a bit steeper. That's going to be DS0. Okay, so this is because we know that the demand for the MMA fighters is elastic, and the demand for the Street Fighters is inelastic, therefore it is a steeper demand curve. So we're going to combine both of these demand curves together, and we know that it's going to be around more than 1. The elasticity is more than 1 because the MMAs, they are actually a bigger group of students than the Street Fighters. So the overall elasticity demand is going to be more than 1. And then we're going to add in a supply curve, which is S0 equals to the sum of all the MC curves. And there we have it. We actually have got the market equilibrium. So the thing is that you have to remember to set the market price only after you have drawn all the demands for the individual consumers. So the market equilibrium is going to give me a equilibrium price that is over here, shown in this dotted line. And we're going to call that P0. Okay, so the consumers are paying P0 and the firms are going to be charging P0. Okay, now let's just complete up the market graphs. The equilibrium is going to be at point A, and the total market quantity will be X0. Street Fighters are at point AS, they are consuming up to XS0, and the MMA fighters, they are going to be at AM, and they're consuming XM0 amount of Muay Thai lessons. And now we add in the MC curve for the training schools. They are the firms, so this is one representative school. And you got the AC curve, and it has to be just nice at this point 80 because they are supposed to be making 0 profits over here, and they are each of the school is producing up to XT0 of Muay Thai lessons. So let's start writing. Let X be the quantity of Muay Thai lessons, and P is going to be the price of the Muay Thai lessons. The initial equilibrium in the market is given at point A, that's in the market graph, where the equilibrium market price of X is P0 and the equilibrium quantity is X0. Alright, next let's talk about consumption. The mixed martial artists are consuming XM0 and spending P0 times XM0 as shown in the green shaded area. So what you want to do is go up to the MMA graph and shade this box green. So this is the area to show expenditure, because to find the area of this green box, you gotta take P0 multiplied by XM0, which is also translated to the amount of spending by that particular consumer. So the Street Fighters are consuming XS0 amount and spending P0 times XX0 amount, as shown in the blue shaded area. So again, I'm going to move up to my Street Fighter graph, and I'm going to shade this blue because that's the area that shows total expenditure. And then let's talk about each training school. So each training school is producing XT0 and making 0 profits at the market price of P0 as the firms maximize their profits at P equals to MC. Okay, so yes, they are trying to maximize their profits, but the fact is that they can't make any. They're not making any supernormal profit, so that is why they are still making zero profit. All right, and so let's check out the training school's graph. So what happens is that the firms are going to set X T naught according to P equals to MC, right? So since this is a perfect competitive market, okay, the price is going to be equals to the marginal cost, and it is also equals to the average cost, and that is why the profit is zero. Okay, so that's the end of part A. See, it's actually pretty simple, right? Now, just a word of caution, please do not use these graphs that you have drawn above for parts B and C, because the graphs above are meant to answer the part A. So if you're going to use it for parts B and C, then the examiner is going to be confused on, okay, so where's part A, right? So don't touch that graphs again. You're going to have to draw a bunch of new graphs. Okay, so now let's move on to part B, where they're talking about the short run. Okay, let's start writing our essay first, okay? So an increase in the price of BJJ lessons will cause a fall in demand for the BJJ lessons from both the MMAs as well as the street fighters. And this is, of course, according to the law of demand. Okay, it is very important that you write down according to the law of demand, okay, because this is intuition, alright? You're explaining to the examiner that you understand what the hell is going on, okay? So we continue. The MMA fighters will then decrease their demand for the Muay Thai lessons since they treat both goods as complements, okay? Treat both goods as complements is also another form of intuition, so you got to write that down. Just let me bring up the quickie pointers real quick. As you can see, I'm applying what I've analyzed of the question into my answer. Okay, so that's how you use your quickie pointers. Analyze the question before doing it. So we know that the demand curve for the MMA fighters will then shift left. That's because there's been a decrease in demand. Now, the street fighters will then increase the demand for the Muay Thai lessons since they treat both goods as substitutes, alright? Both goods as substitutes is another form of intuition, alright? So we gotta emphasize on this kind of stuff. And because of the increase in demand, DS is going to shift towards the right, okay? Now let's talk about the overall market demand. Now the overall market demand will decrease and shift to the left since the larger MMA group has a dominating effect on demand over the smaller street fighter group. So, are you able to identify the intuition? Okay, the intuition is this. The larger MMA group has a dominating effect on demand over the smaller street fighter group. Okay, so that's very important. You have to explain what is your thought process. And the best way to explain your thought process, to show your knowledge, is to actually illustrate how you arrive at certain conclusions. So writing out all these intuitions actually helps very, very greatly. Okay, now I'm just going to get fast hands to draw all the four graphs really fast so that we can speed this entire process up. Alright, let's see how fast it can go, alright? Alright, so that was pretty fast, right? Okay, so watch out for my fast hands, right? So now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to shift the DM towards the left because the MMA fighters has reduced their demand. So the new demand curve is going to be DM1. Okay, do not change the quantity demanded first, alright? You will know why later. So I'm going to go on to the street fighters. I'm now going to shift the demand curve to the right, and the new demand curve is going to be DS1. Okay, again, do not change the demand, okay? We're going to know why soon, okay? After shifting DM and DS, okay, do not mark out XM and XS first, okay? That's what I was trying to say. So if you think about it logically, the reason why I don't do this is because the market price has not changed, right? When there's a change in demand from the consumers, it's going to change the overall market price. And P0 is not the short run price yet, so that's why I'm not doing anything to the quantity demanded by both of these groups. So now let's see what happens to the market price. So overall market demand is going to fall. It's going to fall from D0 to D1. So that is where we're going to get our short run equilibrium output. Okay, and the new intersection over there, okay, that's going to be point B. So at point B, the total market output is going to be X1, and this is going to give me a short run equilibrium price, which is shown by this line over here, and we're going to call that P1. So equilibrium market price is going to be P1. Both consumers are going to be faced with P1, and the training school will have to charge at P1 as well. Alright, so they are price takers, remember that. Now, for the MMAs, they are now at point B. It just so happens to be directly below point AM, and point XM0 is also equals to XM1. As for the Street Fighters, they are at BS, and the new quantity demanded is going to be XS1. So they've increased their demand for Muay Thai lessons. Okay, so it's essay writing time. Okay, so let's start writing. After an increase in the price of the BJJ lessons, the equilibrium price is going to fall to P1. Okay, I'm talking about the price of Muay Thai lessons here. Okay, and the equilibrium quantity then falls to X1. So why is this so? This is due to the excess market supply when the price is P0. So because of the excess supply, the training schools collectively reduce their quantity of Muay Thai lessons that they produce. So they reduce XT. Therefore, X0 is going to fall to X1 like you see over there. Okay, now let's talk about consumer spending. The mixed martial artist spending has obviously fallen. By how much? By the amount given in the green area. Instead of showing the new expenditure, I like to show the change in expenditure so that the examiner knows that I understand whether it is an increase or a decrease. Okay, so that white box that you see over there is the new amount of spending. The green box is the reduction in expenditure. Okay, so it's easier to understand that way. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the Street Fighters. Now, the Street Fighters spending on X has got ambiguous effects. Alright, and the reason why they have ambiguous effects is because they are on a different demand curve, which makes it impossible to analyze any change in spending amount. Okay, I'm pretty sure now you might be thinking, hey, that's bullshit, because for the MMA fighters, they have a new demand curve as well, but we could analyze that they are obviously spending lesser. Well, that's because there is a decrease in the demand. Okay, now for the Street Fighters, there's going to be an increase in demand, so you're not sure exactly whether they're spending more or less, because if you don't believe me, look at point AS and point BS. Alright, find the areas, go shade the areas for point AS and point BS, and you try and tell me which one is bigger. You won't be able to because the graphs here are not drawn to scale, and there are no numbers there, so you can't conclude whether the spending has increased or decreased. Okay, so I mean, go try it yourself. You won't be able to come up with a conclusion. Okay, so now let's move on to the Muay Thai training schools. They will be producing at point BT because that is where P equals to the MC curve, and they have decreased their production to XT1. So let's start writing the essays. Now, each training school has reduced their X produced to XT1. Alright, and this is to maximize their profit according to the P equals to MC profit maximization rule. Now, I have a question for you. Why doesn't the market supply curve shift left? Why? Well, the answer is because the supply, the overall market supply, has already fallen, and it has fallen due to the change in price. And that was shown from the movement from A to B. Okay, so it has really changed due to a change in demand, so therefore there's no shift of the supply curve. Okay, we're gonna talk about the training schools who are trying to maximize their profit. However, they are making losses as each X sold is unable to cover the average cost, as shown in the red shaded area. Okay, so I'm gonna have to show the losses and shade that in red. And if you realize, the statement here, each X sold is unable to cover the average cost, is also another form of intuition. I'm explaining why the firms are making a loss. So when a firm is producing XT1 amount of goods, the average cost associated to that quantity is going to be here. And since the average cost is way up there and the price is way down there at P1, this red shaded area is the losses that each of the training schools is suffering from. Okay, so that's how you identify losses, when the AC is more than the price. So congratulations, that actually completes the short run. That's the end of part B, and we can go on to part C. But before that, just let me remind you that there is nothing to do here, alright? There's nothing to do here because in the short run, the firms cannot exit the market, alright? They got to swallow the losses. Now, let's move on to part C and study how the firms are going to respond to this loss making. Okay, awesome. We are the last part now. Okay, we're going to talk about part C. And we're going to talk about the long run effects of this increase in price of the BJJ lessons. So again, I need to draw new graphs for part C. So I'm just going to get fast hands to draw the initial equilibrium. Alright, so okay, alright, that's the fastest we can go. And now we got to draw the short run effects before we can talk about the long run effects. So I'm just going to get fast hands to do that for me again. And now we gotta add in the short run effects, alright? So, atas, us, atas, okay, alright, so we're done. And trust me, that was totally not my voice, okay? So let's start writing the essays. In the long run, some training schools will be unable to cover their average variable cost at the market price of P1. So when they're unable to do so, they will also be unable to be profitable in the future. So I'm here explaining why certain firms will choose to leave. As you can see, average variable cost is the intuition behind it, because there is a rule where when the price is lower than average variable cost, the firm should close down. So therefore, they start to leave the market, reducing the overall market supply. Okay, so when the overall market supply is going to be reduced, the supply curve is then going to shift to the left. So that's funny. Why is it that this time it shifts to the left? Why? Well, it is because it is due to an external factor, okay? It is due to something that is not price related, okay? It is due to the firms making a decision to leave the market. That's why the supply curve is going to shift left, alright? External factors shifts the demand or the supply curve left, alright? And when I mean external factors, it is factors that has nothing to do with either price or quantity produced or demanded. Changes in price or quantity demanded only cause movements along the curve, and so that was why previously you noticed that the supply curve didn't move. So what you can do from here is to simply shift the supply curve to the left until the equilibrium market price goes back to P0. And then the firms are going to go back to making zero profits, and then you're just going to talk a little bit about your consumer spending, and that's the end of the story. But I'm interested in a little bit of extra points, alright? I'm going to show you how to really impress and to use deeper understanding of other topics to actually make your answer more sexy, alright? So let's talk about extra points. Okay, while training schools leave, what's going to happen is that the demand for production factors, and when I say production factors, what I mean is things like your gyms, the trainers, the equipments, the kicking bags, etc. The demand for all these things are going to fall because there are lesser training schools now. Therefore, the market price for all these production factors, assuming that the factor market is perfectly competitive, the price for all these factors are going to fall. Okay, this is very important. It's a key assumption in order to gain these extra points. Okay, this is going to decrease the cost of production for the remaining schools. So what does that mean? Well, this simply means that their cost curves are going to shift down, alright? You don't have to worry whether it's variable or fixed cost, it's just in general, costs are going to fall, alright? Concurrently, the supply curve is going to shift left, and the shifting of this supply curve to the left is going to push up the market price, and it's going to push up until the remaining schools make zero profits. And the point where the firms make zero profit, it is also the point when the market reaches its final or long run equilibrium. Okay, so this is for the extra points. It's really going to sexify your answer, right? So if you don't want the extra sexy points, you can actually just move the supply curve to the left. But I suggest that you move the MC and the AC first. Where you're going to move them? You're going to move them to the left side, okay? So you're going to draw the MC first. The MC is going to shift to the left because the cost is cheaper. And then you're going to define your average cost. You know that your average cost is going to be somewhere here because the new price is going to be between P0 and P1. Okay? And then you're going to set the price level to be P2. That's where the firms make zero profit because the P equals to the AC. and you draw your supply curve to intersect the new demand curve at that point. So that's your new supply curve, alright, and the new market equilibrium is going to be here, point C. Okay, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see. Alright, point C is going to give me X2 amount of quantity in the market, and the price, the new equilibrium price, is going to be P2. Let's check out the consumers. The street fighters are going to be at point CS. They're going to reduce their amount of consumption at the price of P2. The mixed martial artists are also going to reduce their consumption to point CM at the price of P2. I'm pretty sure this last part is very straightforward to you, alright? It's just determining what will be the new points that each of these people are going to be at. Now we're going to continue writing our conclusion. So in conclusion, the market equilibrium price and the quantity is now at P2 and X2 respectively, right? The MMAs are now spending lesser on the Muay Thai lessons since the demand for Muay Thai lessons is elastic. So we now have to write an intuition for that. An increase in price causes them to decrease their total spending as they are more price sensitive. Alright, you can see that this is the intuition over here, and this is the intuition for the case where the demand is elastic and the expenditure actually follows the change in the quantity demanded. Alright, and this is going down. You can see that the MMA fighters are demanding lesser, therefore their total expenditure is going to fall. Now the street fighters are now spending more on Muay Thai lessons since their demand is inelastic. Again, we have to provide an intuition for this. An increase in the price causes them to spend more because they are not as price sensitive. Alright, they're not sensitive to the price, and this is the intuition for the inelastic demand. Now let's check out the firms. Okay, so the firms, they are going to be at point C over here as mentioned just now. This is where P equals to MC equals to AC, and they've reduced their production to XT2. Let's complete that. The firms are now making zero profits in the long run as the price equals to, come on, write faster, damn it. As the price equals to the marginal cost, which is also equals to the average cost. Alright, so you have completed part C and you have completed the entire long question. Oh man, this is a long question for sure. So let's just make sure that we've covered all our quickie pointers, and if we have done that, I want to thank you for starting with Quickienomics. We'll see you in the next exam questions. Alright, take care.